Hi everyone, welcome back to the thetechyned vlog. Hope you had a great holiday. So, just as a reminder that I'm not paid by IIBA or Scrum.org or even PMI, but I'm just sharing my knowledge and experience. So, just love for us to go back. Remember that we are still on business analysis, planning, and monitoring. We've done plan business analysis approach. We've looked at plan stakeholder engagement, and now we're at plan BA governance. So for plan BA governance, we are going to look at the purpose, the description, the input, the element, the guidelines and tools, the techniques, stakeholders, and outputs. So let's jump right into it. And please, if what we've been sharing so far has been of use to you, kindly comment, share, and like. Yes. So, plan business analysis governance. And remember, whenever we look at governance, it has to do with approvals, it has to do with taking decisions, it has to do with consultations, and yeah. So, what is the purpose of plan business analysis governance under business analysis planning and monitoring? The purpose of plan business analysis governance is to define how decisions are made about requirements and designs, including reviews, change control, approvals, and prioritization. So I can take that again. So the purpose of plan business analysis, that is for you to plan your governance, is to define how decisions are made about requirements and design. So you have to you have to plan how decisions will be taken on your requirements and designs, including reviews. When you are doing your reviews, change control, for example, in the middle of your project you need to change some stuffs, or maybe some stuffs have been introduced. So how do you want to go about that? Approvals, you don't want to go to the wrong person for approval, so you plan, who do I go to for approvals? Then prioritization, remember that you have lots of requirements, so you want to prioritize that, because for example, business would be like, oh, we need this to go first because this would bring in the minimum viable income for us. So yes, so the purpose of this is just for you to look at your decision making when it comes to your requirements and design, your reviews, your change control, approvals, and prioritization. Then moving on from there to the description. Business analysts ensure that a governance process is in place and clarify any ambiguities within it. So, as a business analyst, your job is to ensure that the governance process is in place. There's a governance process that you have people taking decision, and you know the right person to go to at each point. And when it comes to ambiguities, you need to clarify those. So you make sure that that is in place. Who you go for clarification. A governance process identifies the decision makers. Now, when you have your governance process plan, or you have it well spelled out, it helps you to identify the decision makers. Who should make the decisions? Who should I have on this board, on this meeting, to help me take decisions on this and that? Okay. Process, make sure that your process, identify your process and information required for decisions to be made. So you also know who to go for when it comes to information you require for decisions to be made. Okay, so a governance process describes how approvals and prioritization decisions are made for requirements and design. Still telling us that your governance process helps you when it comes to your approvals and prioritization. For example, when it comes to Scrum, the minimum viable product. I think I said minimum viable income. Sorry, minimum viable product. That is the least, like the product that will give you the least amount of turnover or whatever. So that is how Scrum operates. Oh, we want to design this because when users are able to purchase stuff online, we are able to gain some income, or we are able to gain some returns. Okay. Then, when planning the governance approach, business analysts identify how business analysis work will be approached and prioritized. So it's just still trying to, describe, or trying to give you like a better view of what the governance process is all about. Just like repeating what we have seen in the purpose and description summary. So we are now going right into it. So when you are planning your governance approach, you as a business analyst, you identify how the business analysis work will be approached and prioritized. So how you want to approach your business analysis work and how you want to identify, okay, you want to prioritize what the process for proposing a change to business analysis information is. So what is the process when it comes to someone proposing a change? Who has the authority and responsibility to propose changes, and who should be involved in the change discussion? So you don't want to listen to the wrong person when it comes to change. You don't want to get receive change requests from the wrong person. You don't want to submit it to the wrong person. You don't want to have the wrong person sign it or approve it. Okay, so you want to put all these factors, all these things in place. Who has the authority and responsibility to propose changes? Yes, not everyone has the authority to propose. You remember, you have your different types of stakeholders. You have your stakeholder analysis. So you know who can come forward with a change and you put it in, and also who can come forward with a change and you need to take it through, those that should review it for approval. And who should be involved in the change discussions? Yes, who should be involved in the change discussions? Who has the responsibility for analyzing change requests? So who can analyze? Who should you go to when it comes to analyzing those change requests? Who has the authority to approve changes? And how changes will be documented and communicated. Very, very important. So in different firms or in different project spaces, there are different ways of documenting change. There are different processes and there are different ways of communicating it. So you want to put those in place. Some people would want to have everything on SharePoint. Some would want to have it on SharePoint and at the same time communicated via email. Some would need you to have like a change review board meeting, and then you can now put it up for communication or put it out, so input, what do you actually need to get this working? Okay, so you would need your business analysis approach. You need to get an understanding, a grasp of your business analysis approach. You have to bring it in here. So incorporating the overall business analysis approach into the governance approach is necessary to ensure consistency across the approaches. Yes, because when it comes to Scrum or Agile, and when it comes to Waterfall, the change process is quite different. So you want to incorporate your approach when it comes to governance. Then stakeholder engagement approach, same as you have in Agile, is also different with Waterfall when it comes to stakeholder engagement. So you have to incorporate that when it comes to your governance so that you know how to approach. So identifying the stakeholders and understanding their communication and collaboration needs is useful in determining their participation in the governance approach. Yeah, some stakeholders will be like, oh, I like to communicate through email, I like to have a meeting and stuff like that. So you have to know your stakeholders, you have to know how best they want to be communicated. Okay, then, and remember that when it comes to your stakeholders in Agile, is quite different from Waterfall, because your stakeholders in Agile, you need like close communication, close interaction with them for your Scrum reviews, your sprint planning. At each point, you want to go back to them. Okay, are we doing the right thing? Do we need to change stuff? And, all that. So the engagement approach may be updated based on the completion of the governance approach. So everything here is like a living document. So with time, as things evolve, you may need to update your document, you may need to update your process and all that. So let's look at the plan business analysis governance input output diagram. Okay, so guidelines and tools. Looking at the guidelines and tools, the business analysis performance assessment. Remember your business analysis performance assessment. What have you done before, and what have we gained from that? Or how can it be useful to us here? Business policies. Oh my goodness, like when it comes to business policies, this is different from one firm to the other, even down to the teams, down to business, down to needs is different. So you need to have that should form your guideline or your tools. Then current state description. What is obtainable now? You need to understand how things are done currently. Then legal or regulatory information. Very, very important. You need to have this at the back of your mind. Like, are there legal or regulatory information that we require here? And also that is where governance comes in, like those at the higher sphere would help guide you when it comes to your legal or regulatory information. Then input. So business analysis approach, remember you would need your business analysis approach as your input. Stakeholder engagement approach, you need your stakeholder engagement. How do you want to engage your stakeholders? Then you move on to plan business analysis governance. Then your output should be governance approach. So let's move right to the tags using this output. So, whenever you see an input and you see an output, there are some tags that make use of that output. So the tags that will be making use of this output will be plan business analysis information management, which we are going to see later on. Okay, prioritize requirements, and also assess requirement changes, approve requirements. Then moving on to the elements, just so that we look at what we want to see here. Remember that we are looking at the purpose, the description, input, element, guidelines and tools, techniques, stakeholders, and outputs. So the elements. Now, decision making. Decisions are made throughout the initiative. Okay, a stakeholder may serve in various roles in the decision making process, such as participant in partic- participant in decision making discussions, subject matter expert lending experience and knowledge to the decision making process, and reviewer of information and approval of decisions. So just telling you that when it comes to decision making, this is a very important part of your plan business analysis governance approach. Okay, decisions are made throughout the initiative. Like, at times you need to have schedule meetings, have contacts with your stakeholders, because you need them to look at stuff, you need them to make decision on stuff. So a stakeholder may serve in various roles in the decision making process, such as when it comes to participating in decision making discussions. If the person is your SME or has experience on the project and you need to touch base with them often as much as possible, review of information. There are some information inflow that you get and you need someone to review it to know where to triage it or to channel it to. Then approval of decisions. Yes, at the end, whatever decision you make, someone needs to approve. So the decision making process defines what happens when teams cannot reach consensus. Oh, yes, by identifying escalation paths and key stakeholders who hold final decision making authority. Yes, there are some times that even when you come in to brainstorm and at the end you have options, but you've not reached like a conclusive end, you need someone to just come and say, let's go with this or let's go with that, and approve it as well. So, yeah. So now, okay, so let's move on from there. So the second element you have here is change control process. When business analysts develop a change control process, there, one, determine the process for requesting changes. Yes. So when you have a change control process in place, what do you do from there? So it helps you to determine the process for requesting changes. There is a process for requesting change. It moves from one person to the other. It has documentation requirements and so on and so forth. So specify which requirements and design the change control process covers. So you have to be sure of, when it comes to requirements and design, what does this talk to? What does this process or what does it cover? And determine whether it applies to all changes or only to changes of a specific size. Yeah, there are some changes or there are some processes that are streamlined, but there are some also that are general, that this process can serve for this and that. So you have to determine whether it's specific to its size, to a cost or level of effort. So this process details the steps for proposing a change, when the changes can be proposed, who can propose changes, and how change requests are communicated. So when you've taken all the decision, when you look at the cost, the size, and all manner of of planning, so also you also decide like how these requests are communicated. So also determine the elements the change request. So determine the elements of the change request. Identify the information to be included in a proposal to support decision making and implementation if it is approved. So what should this encompass? Okay. So what is included in your proposal, what it should cover and or whatnot. So possible components to consider on a change request are, when it comes to change report, what should you consider? Cost and time estimate. You have to look at the impact. For each area affected by the proposed change, the expected cost of change is estimated. You have to have this in mind. What would this change cost our project? How would this change impact the time or estimate? Benefit, an explanation of how the change aligns with the initiative and the business objective to show how the change adds value. So how does this change benefit the project? Because you don't want to go about putting in a change that is just there for aesthetics. No, we need money. So it depends on the goal of the project. That also would also depend on which change you should welcome or the one you should put in your backlog. Benefits considered include both financial benefits and tactical benefits, such as implications to scope, time, cost, quality, and resources. Yes, you don't want to have a change or introduce a change that has implications when it comes to scope. It changes the scope of the project, or the one that would, make you extend the time of your project, or the cost, or even downgrade the quality, or even the resources, cost you more resources. You may need to crash, or you may need to level up your resources so that you can accommodate the change. Risk, any analysis of risk to the initiative, the solution, or business objective. So you have to analyze the risk. Okay, what's the worst that can happen when we take up this change? How are we seeing any time lapse, any cost, and are there regulatory risk and all whatnot? Priority, the level of importance of the change relative to other factors such as organizational objectives, regulatory compliance requirements, and stakeholder needs. Priority. So when you are setting your priorities, you have to set them right according to, does this meet the need of the firm, or the company, or even the project, or regulatory. For example, if it's a construction project and you know that there are pipelines on the, and when it comes to such constructions, you're not supposed to tamper with pipeline. It's regulatory. And even stakeholder needs, does this meet your stakeholder needs? Then course of action, the course of action for the change includes an assessment of the components of the change requests. So, when it comes to cost, time, benefit, risk, and priority, it is common to identify several alternative courses, that is, including those recommended by the requester and by other stakeholders. So, makers can make a choice that would best serve the needs of the initiative. So, when it comes to course of action, where are you going with this change actually? What do you see at the end? So, does this also cut across or meet cost, time, risk, and priority? So determine how changes will be prioritized. It is very important. Like, yes, it's good you prioritize, but what are the guiding factors when it comes to prioritizing this change? So the priority of the proposed change is established relative to other competing interests within the current initiative. Yeah. For example, you have other projects running concurrently, and their resources, their cost, their time. So how would this impact those? So like, what should guide our priority? you know and there, you have your different levels of stakeholders. This stakeholder, if we take up this change, how would it impact his decision, or how would it impact his interest? Okay. So determine how changes will be documented. So configuration management and traceability standards establish product baselines and version control practices to identify which baseline is affected by the change. Remember, like in SharePoint, you have your, what is it, version control, you have your configuration, you have your, maybe your DevOps, or whatever you want to use as your means of documenting it and stuff like that. You also need to look at, okay, if we are using this system, or if we are using this tool to document, what are the impact, what are the implications? Okay, does it have version control? Do we want a collaborative tool whereby everybody would have access? Who should have access to the document? How do we even, is there a standard? And remember, where there is no standard, you as a business analyst would need to go out there and create something that you can introduce, as a standard. So determine how changes will be communicated. How do you want this to be communicated? Do you want to use SharePoint whereby you can send a direct email to everyone, or do you want to, download document and communicate it out there? But remember, whenever you download a document, you will need to be sharing it. So do you want that stress, or do you want that risk of people losing documents or tampering with documents? So how do you want it to be communicated? And another thing, remember, going back to your stakeholders, some stakeholders would prefer like a particular means of communication. So you have to meet all those. You have to remember like all those details. So how proposed change under review and approved, declined or deferred changes will be communicated to stakeholders. Also, this is very, very important. Anything that happens, you have to communicate it. You have to put out the words, and you should know who to put out the words to. Determine who would perform the impact analysis. So specify who is responsible for performing an analysis of the impact the proposed change will have across the initiative. So determine who would authorize changes. Very important. Like there are some projects that if you're not careful, you meet the wrong person for approval. And now when it then gets to the development, or even when it has to go live, they tell you that this signature, this person that approved this is not supposed to be here. It's actually quite how will I embarrassing, So you have to get your facts right. You have to work closely with your stakeholders, and make sure you ask questions. Make sure you always go back to specify, is this right, before you send out that email. So include a designation of who can approve changes and what business analysis information their authority covers. Simple. So moving on to the third element, plan prioritization approach. Yes. What approach do you want to use when it comes to prioritization? Timelines, expected value, dependencies, resources constrained, adopted methodologies, and other factors influence how requirements and design are prioritized. So let's looking at your timelines. Oh, okay. Will this project take us more time, or will this task take us more time? Okay, we need to move it low. Okay, now expected value. Oh, will this give us the value we actually want when it comes to users logging in? If we think that it is not important for users to maybe create their profile first, they can go on to purchase. Let's move the login part to maybe to the next slide, or to the next line, or to maybe to the parking lot. Okay, dependencies. Okay, is this task dependent on any other task, to bring forward, or maybe a task that needs to go with another task? Okay, let's merge this task with this task. Resource constraint. Do we have resources that can do this at this point? If not, let's move it out. Adopted methodologies. Remember, Waterfall, Agile, or whatever methodology. Do we have constraints, or do we have people that can, impute this or implement this? And other factors influence how requirements and designs are prioritized. And just a reminder that we are still on plan business analysis governance, and we are looking at the purpose, description, input, element, guidelines and tools, techniques, stakeholders, output. So, yes, when planning the prioritization process, business analysts determine the formality and rigor of the prioritization process, participants who will be involved in prioritization, process for deciding how prioritization will occur, including which prioritization techniques will be utilized, and criteria to be used for prioritization. For example, requirements may be prioritized based on cost, risk, and value. And yes, I think we can take a quick break here and come back. And when we get back, we'll just continue with plan prioritization approach that is under element for governance process. Yes, thank you. Hi everyone, welcome back. So I hope you were able to take some rest and stretch those muscles. Now, just a reminder that we are back to business analysis, planning, and monitoring. So we are still on plan business analysis governance. And we've looked at the purpose, the description, the input, and we are still on the element. believe so. Yes. And yes, and also under plan business analysis, governance, you have the input, and your input is plan business analysis approach, your stakeholder engagement approach, then your elements, decision making, change control process, plan prioritization approach, plan for approvals, and then your output is governance approach. So let's move right back to into it. And remember that we mentioned that when it comes to your governance, it has to do with your approvals, it has to do with your reviews, who to take decisions, who you should go through, whether it's regulatory and all whatnot. So we are on the third element, and that is plan prioritization approach. And whatever you need to do with your prioritization, you have to consider your timeline, dependencies, resources, and all whatnot. So, when planning your prioritization process, business analysts determine the formality and rigor of the prioritization process. So, what formality do you want to approach? Do you want to use? Okay, and also do you also have to consider the you also have to determine the rigor of the prioritization process. What's the rigor? Like you don't want to create too much bottleneck that an approval or a document will be with someone for such a long time. And another thing, you want to save that document, you want to upload that document to somewhere that it is accessible. Okay. And you know that there are so many factors to consider here, but the thing is it's better when it's practical. So when you are at that point, it's good to think fast and it is good to consult people to know how you can move on from there. So you also have to determine the participant who will be involved in the prioritization. You don't want to get people that are not supposed to be there involved, or people that would be blockers and stuff like that. So also determine the process for deciding how the prioritization would occur. What process would the prioritization, as in what process do you want to take it through, including which prioritization techniques will be utilized. What prioritization technique do you want to use? And also criteria to be used for prioritization. What criteria do you want to, what factors would determine your prioritization? For example, requirements may be prioritized based on costs, based on the risk, and based on value. We've done this. So the approach should also determine which stakeholders will have a role in prioritization. So plan for approvals. So this is very, very, very important, because if you get the wrong person to approve, is an issue. And if you get also the right person to approve the wrong thing, is an issue too. So you have to get your facts right. So an approval formalizes the agreement between all stakeholders that the content and presentation of the requirements and designs are accurate, adequate, and contain sufficient detail to allow for continued progress to be made. Yes, please, this is very, very important, because just like I mentioned, you need to get your facts right. You need to go to the right person to get this approved. Okay. And another thing is, yeah, there are some changes that, when it comes like this, it pauses the whole thing. So we need to get the change out as soon as possible. We need to get the approvals as soon as possible so that we can continue with the project. In fact, when it comes to regulatory, oh my goodness, some people will be like, let's just put our tents here, because we know we are going to wait for a long while, because it will go through legal, it will go through all the authorities and stuff like that. Yeah. So the timing and frequency of approvals are dependent on the size and complexity of the change and the associated risk of foregoing or delaying an approval. So the timing and the frequency, how often of approvals, are dependent on the size and complexity. Like how is the change? What's the magnitude of the change? And also what risk is associated with this change. Some approvals, or some people would want to scrutinize it, we want to review it, we want to get their lawyer to read it to make sure that everything is in place, even to want to get their consultants, maybe external project managers, to go through it to make sure that everything is in place before they come back to you to approve. So the business analyst must determine the type of requirements and designs to be approved. So you have to determine that. But before you put in anything, oh my goodness, what is the implication when it comes to cost, time, risk, etc.? The timing for the approval, the process to follow to gain approval, and who would approve the requirements and design. Yeah, when planning the appropriate approval process, business analysts consider the organizational culture. Very important. So when you are planning your process, you will look at the organizational culture and the type of information being approved. So don't just go bringing in any change here. Some people, like, I'm trying to sound like, don't you want to, that kind of thing. So you look at the culture of the organization, then you know how to bring in your change, your stuff like that. And, even I will tell you, at times you'll be you'd be employed to bring in change, and at the same time the person that gets you in tells you, oh, you know um you would have those difficult discussions with you that you may not know how to manage, because you're like, I thought you wanted me to bring in this, and what's going on? So, for example, new systems or process for highly regulated industries such as financial, pharmaceutical, or healthcare are likely to require frequent and rigorous review and approval of very detailed specifications. Well, this explains itself. When it comes to pharmaceuticals, healthcare, financial, it goes through a lot of scrutiny. For other types of initiatives, a less intensive approval process may be more appropriate and result in a faster implementation. So, know the type of approval you are bringing in and know the culture. Is it something like, is it an industry that is highly regulated, and know what to expect? Okay. Planning for approval also includes the schedule of events where approvals will occur and how they will be tracked. So you need to determine how your approvals will be tracked. Stakeholder availability, attitude, and willingness to engage determine the efficiency of the approval process and may significantly affect delivery timelines. Yes, know the body language of your stakeholders, guidelines, and tools. Now, number one is business analysis performance assessment. Provides results of previous assessment that should be reviewed and incorporated into all planning approaches. What you've done before, how does it impact or how does it help what we are doing presently? Business policies define the limits within which the decisions must be made. So when it comes to business, they have their policies. We don't go there, go here. Okay, we do this, we accept this, we don't accept this. Okay, we may likely, okay, let's have a review of this. Okay, just know their policies or have a SME guide you. They may be described by regulations, contracts, agreements, warranties, certifications, or other legal obligations. Current state description, what is obtainable now, provides a context within which the work needs to be completed. This information can help drive how to make better decisions. Legal or regulatory information describes legislative rules or regulations that must be followed and can be used to help develop a framework that ensures sound business decision making. So let's move on. Techniques. Brainstorming, used to generate an initial list of potential stakeholder names who may need approval rules and define the governance process. Document analysis, used to evaluate existing governance process or templates. Interviews, used to identify possible decision making, change control, approval, or prioritization approaches and participants with an individual or small group. Item tracking, used to track any issues that arise when planning a governance approach. Lesson learned, what have you learned? Used to find if past initiatives have identified valuable experiences within governance that can be leveraged on current or future initiatives. Organizational modeling, used to understand roles or responsibilities within the organization in an effort to define a governance approach that involves the right stakeholders. Process modeling, used to document the process or methods for governing business analysis. Reviews, used to review the proposed governance plan with key stakeholders. Survey or questionnaires, used to identify possible decision making, change, control, approval, or prioritization approaches and participants. Workshops, used to identify possible decision making, change control, approval, or prioritization approaches and participants within a team setting. So let's look at our stakeholders when it comes to governance. Your domain subject matter expert. This is your number one person. So they have expertise in the area. Okay. Maybe possible source of a requested change or maybe identified as needing to be involved in change decisions. So your SMEs, okay, SME, like your subject matter experts, okay, what do you think about this change? How would it impact? Because they are like they have been working in that area, or they have worked in that area, and they know the in and out, and they know that is this change, would this change bring in value? Okay, so you have that discussion with them. Project manager works with the business analyst to ensure that that overall project governance aligns with the business analysis governance approach. Regulator may impose rules or regulations that need to be considered when determining the business analysis governance plan. May also be a possible source of a requested change. So the regulator keeps you guys in check. The sponsor can impose their own requirements for how business analysis information should be managed. Participants in change discussions and approves proposed changes. Output. So after all the back and forth when it comes to the governance, plan governance approach, your output will be governance approach. You now have a governance approach, how things will be done, the process, who to go to for approval, who to get involved in your meetings and all whatnot. Identifies the stakeholders who will have the responsibility and authority to make decisions about business analysis work, including who will be responsible for setting priorities and who will approve changes to business analysis information. It also defines the process that will be utilized to manage requirement and design changes across the initiatives. And this brings us to the end of plan business analysis governance approach. So we are going to move into plan business analysis information management when we come back next time. And thank you so much for being with us till now. Do take care. Bye.